slightly out of the contours of normal critique videos, I'll take a stab at someone who is more fringe probably to many of you, unless you have some particular interest in venture capital or capitalism in general, or are terminally online on Twitter or X or whatever it is. Then you'll have this understanding of Marc Andreessen. Marc Andreessen, by way of introduction, is the founding and eponymously named Andreessen Horowitz A16Z, I think it's called, venture capital firm in Silicon Valley in San Francisco, California, where they are the leading, probably, venture capital firm in many ways, or top 5, something like this, in terms of AUM, in terms of fund size, in terms of deployment, in terms of backed companies. And you can see here just a very small clip out of who they've backed over the years, including Airbnb, Figma, Lyft, Instagram, Facebook. So many names that you're well familiar with have been run through the VC investment committee of A16Z, AZ16, with your man Marc Andreessen here saying yes. So obviously clearly a capable and perspicacious investor to many degrees. He also built internet browser or something, I think something in the 90s, way back when, with all these other geriatric tech guys who are now well off, millionaires, billionaires, because they were tithing technology and markets and internet in a way that was very fortuitous. And in that happenstance, most of them have come out on top, at least pecuniary with money. If not, they feel as if it's a moral status designation of their superiority as a tech bro. Now, the tech bros are interesting because they became a political force on the culmination of money politics, and that's because previously you had money or moneyed interests being incumbent, usually heirs, heiresses, established firm owners, people like the grand supporters of the Republican Party, from Cargill or those two brothers from that industrial firm. I can't remember the names at the moment. And you have a lot of these backers, even Robert Mercer, who's maybe nouveau riche in this instance, but from a financial background. So there was this idea that when the money came, then the political favors could be bought, and so they were. And so large primarily democratic backers from the, say, 2000s up until 2020, 2021 were from Silicon Valley. The shift, the catalyzation of Biden administration and crackdown on limitless or unlimited tech, you say levity or leniency, they were able to institute certain guardrails on AI, on cryptocurrency, on these things, the Biden administration that is, which is not taken too kindly by men who are used to doing what they want in the technology space without interference. And with this impingement, they felt as if they were ripe to switch sides to the Trump second term, and now led here by one of the cabal, the tech bro cabal, we call him, Marc Andreessen, who's now on many podcasts and somewhat of an internet personality in terms of his opinions, and particularly opinion pieces on certain subjects that relate to tech, politics, this triangulation of finance as well. So with this very rotund chap, I have a few things to say, and the first is that he's no friend of mine. Not that he couldn't or shouldn't be, is that he isn't. He is probably too aged and decrepit in his moral standing and framework to change sides to the right side at this point in time. He has too much vested interests, and his experience has been too narrowed in a, say, ethical or Weltanschauung. He has a very clear ability to learn and to read and to propound certain ideas, and clearly he has the technology vision in a way that allows him to invest well, but this is not correspondent to good political instincts. And furthermore, he's only famous because he's rich. That's it. That's the ticker here. there are many men in Silicon Valley who have invented very, very leading edge, cutting edge, innovative products and made millions or billions, and you don't know their names. You never hear from them. And why is that? It's because they choose not to involve themselves with politics, because they probably understand that technology and business to some degree and politics are not equal. These things are not commensurate to your skill sets. And Marc, I think, is going to find out a very hard lesson here, that he'll be tossed aside very quickly and very harshly by those who don't deem him to be an asset at some point in time. Now, he's a turncoat himself. So obviously trust, if I was to trust him, it would be infinitesimal. It'd be negligible. You can't trust someone who backed Obama. And you would think, no, there's a lot of bandwagoning in that point in time, and he was probably just riding the waves of popularity that Obama was feeling. But he went and donated. He publicly endorsed him and backed him. And you can see that's one of these quotes that I've taken out from an interview that he did with some arse-hats journalists from the New York Times. So I'll read you just an excerpt here from our friend, the elliptical, paraboloid, skulled, noggin-headed friend. Marc says, "The breakdown was during the second Obama term. It took me by surprise. I think maybe that one person who didn't take by surprise is our mutual friend, Peter Thiel. As with a lot of things, I think he saw it coming earlier than I did, but it definitely took me by surprise. And just to give full context there, I had met Obama in, I think, 06 or 07 when he was a new senator, and he seemed great. It's the perfect package. It's literally everything you could possibly dream for in a president. He has all the right social views, and he seems like an inheritor of the Clinton Gore. He says all the right things about capitalism at the time and about entrepreneurship. He's clearly in love with tech." I think you could probably see the leanings here of Marc's political stance in that it's, how does it relate to me? How does it relate to Marc Andreessen? And I normally wouldn't fault someone for this, but being such a megalomaniac when it comes to a political position, and it comes to influencing other people's outcomes, their lives, their experiences, and their reality from a very singular position, is what a fucking retarded person would do, Marc. You are a retard. And it's going to be hard to hear that because you're very clever. And this is to say, he goes on all of these podcasts and talks in a variety of subjects as if he were an adroit expert with a certain level of knowledge. And, him and Lex Friedman and their insouciance and their badinage going back and forth on topics that are very serious, actually. And Marc has come across more of a dilettante or a fair weather friend than anything else. It's embarrassing. And he's fat. I know that I probably should have led with that, and you know how I feel about spiritually fat people. And I think even with the Ozempic, he's not helping him because he's still a lard-ass, portly, rotund dum-dum. And once again, I know that the name-calling, you might feel as if a bit puerile or a bit silly. It's very important for people to be denigrated, embarrassed, and shamed because they will not improve if they think that they are achieving something. They're winners. They're in some status game whereby what they're doing is achieving the right outcomes. We've played the game. They've set the rules. Now they've won in their minds. This is not the case, Marc, with your weird-shaped noggin. You are in the wrong party here. You've backed the wrong horse, and you don't get to just switch sides as if it's some convenient reality you want to tessellate into. You go, no, I was this Obama, let's go baby, we have a beautiful African president now. You can go find the quotes on this. He's like, oh yeah, he's great, he's from Indonesia, he's from Kenya, he's going to show the world what an international president. What country do you think you live in, Marc? And clearly, obviously, as I said before, he's entrenched in this idea that San Francisco, because there's so many brown people who are clever and produce things, that this is somehow able to translate into, is equivalent to the entire world if they were all just people where they're supposed to go in their merit, in their talents, then we'll have a more productive and propitious world. And in this august future that Marc envisions, it's one of abundance. Now, we clearly have an agreement, Marc and I, in terms of the preeminence of technology and technics. And I think he would probably get a lot out of reading Oswald Spengler's Man and Technics, because he very naturally embodies a lot of those feelings, those life feelings, and in his ego has that sense to it. It's very natural for him and instinctual. I mean, you can admire that in someone like Marc. What you can't, and the capitalist part as well, I always say, like, I don't disavow capitalism per se, or the entreaty of business to make money and assigning capital in that way to make the most amount of money possible under a system. I think that the market makes those clever decisions, and it's a good way of filtering out risk and reward scenarios and situations, usually in a fair game. Obviously with IP theft and Chinese business practices and manipulation, obviously is suffering from a different range of problems there. But in general, we can feel as if Marc has the right mark on certain topics. Where he loses it, and completely, because it's not even baffling, because obviously he is someone who lived in a place where he felt comfortable around people like him, and the people like him were, once again, third world merit-based try-hard strivers. This is an embarrassing bunch of people to feel as if you belong next to. Marc clearly is the unique advisor type in court, hence why even in popular media he's portrayed identically to this guy. You would think that they are brothers, unironically. And this is the idea that we all live into an archetype, and I think Marc has been fortunate enough to live in a period of time where his success, as is measured by current culture, as is measured by current civilizational standards, shows him to be a very large success, because his bank account has a very large number, and he makes a lot of good decisions when it comes to technology companies. Well done, Marc. But as we go into the future and money becomes much less important in politics, you might have to fight for things in a way that you were not prepared for, clearly, to fight for anything. That, except maybe the next serving at a buffet. Because here, and I'll walk you through the 4 quotes as to why so clearly Marc has failed to grasp what it means to be a Gothic Faustian man in the first instance, and in the second instance, the ability of a Caesar to rise above the mass, the morass, and particularly transcending capital and capitalism in that way. So he wrote this manuscript, we call it a manifesto, optimistic tech manifesto, where it's a long-winded, basically drivel, corpo drivel. And you have to understand that when Marc goes out to speak, he's speaking on behalf of his investment firm first, because he's Robo-Marc. He's the representation of money. Mate, if you have $1 billion, why don't you actually just try and take a real position? What do you still want more money for? What is it going to give you? What is it, 2 billion, 3 billion, 5 billion? What is that going to, you feel good about that? At least Paul Allen had it right. The guy retires from Microsoft, fucks off on his massive super yacht, and just throws parties. I wouldn't necessarily advocate for that type of hedonism, but the guy at least very clearly had a direction in his life he wanted to take outside of this grind mentality of, no, I continue to want to position myself as if I'm some, and it clearly, obviously, for this ego, and this is the egomania of this guy, it's the only fulfillment of his status, continue to be relevant in that way. It's like, I'm the big honcho, I'm the magnate, I'm the tycoon in Silicon Valley, and I need to continue to hold that position, otherwise who am I? What would I offer the world? You'd be some anonymous tech inventor and entrepreneur. There is nothing wrong with that, by the way. It's just when you try to become too big for your britches, you end up like Marc, which is going to be one of those cases once again. And he's even worse than someone, say, like Peter Thiel or Elon, because both of those have much more natural grasp around humanity. The Marc is very calculated in a way that's not endearing and just a bit sociopathic. And I won't say he is a sociopath. It's just very clearly he's so self-possessed and very clearly focused that everything that comes across when he speaks is, how does this relate to Marc? And secondly, how does this relate to A16Z? Or how non-catchy that name is. I'll go back and look after this video, and I'll probably have got it wrong the whole time. Should have picked an easier name, Marc. Don't know what to tell you. Okay, so from the manifesto, he just took a small excerpt here, which outlines, I think, the very clear, basic, fundamental misunderstanding that Marc has of reality in general. He writes in this section on the future, where did we come from? Our civilization was built on a spirit of discovery, of exploration, of industrialization. Where are we going? What world are we building for our children and their children and their children? A world of fear, guilt, and resentment? Or a world of ambition, abundance, and adventure? We believe in the words of David Deutsch. We have a duty to be optimistic, because the future is open, not predetermined, and therefore cannot just be accepted. We are all responsible for what it holds. Thus, it is our duty to fight for a better world. We owe the past and the future. It's time to be a techno-optimist. It's time to build. There's 1,000 angels clapping for you, Marc. Such an inspiring manifesto. For what exactly, I could not tell you. So with this horse shit out the way, I think first and foremost, he's very clearly, it's corpo-driven, as I said to you before, but the idea here that he's spouting and espousing anything other than the banalities of corporate tech, Silicon Valley men, right wing. There's nothing inherently promising in anything that he wrote here. First of all, civilization is built on discovery, exploration, and industrialization. No, it's built on techniques. These things are topics, and that's fine. But we are the Faustian men who sold our soul for the infinite will to techniques. The techniques enable all these things. They enable discovery and exploration and industrialization. These are all downstream of this one thing. And he's read Nietzsche, and so I think he must at some level grasp Nietzsche's importance on the soul feeling, on your Weltanschauung, on how you live your life and operate. But it's very clear here that he's misapplying it, or he's just forgetting that it also translates to every facet of life, including his precious technology. And obviously these rhetorical questions are the work of, not Shakespeare at least, but some tyro essay typist. And maybe he ran it through AI or something. But I think that my biggest gripe here is the leaning on the word optimistic. Optimism is for cowards, as Spengler rightly said. Nothing about this needs to be optimistic. We have a duty to it, and I would say not optimism, but we have a duty to continue to become, in general, as we are. That is the Faustian destiny, and that's what our fated amor fati is. But other than that, we already know there are two predeterminations here, and I'm not being facetious when I say this. A, we're going down to the realm of Caesars. This is divine. It's preordained. The second is, in the long run, we're all dead anyway. So very clearly, we can understand what the future holds for us in the short-ish term and the very long term. There's an annihilation of our entire planet. Okay, so we work backwards from there, Marc. We can very clearly predict. You just have to be very clear which part of the prediction you're interested in. If you want to know in the next 2 years what happens, that's obviously very difficult. If you know 100 years, it's much easier to glean insights from historical precedents on that. We use that analogous cases for this, and it works very well on a very clearly defined path that Spengler outlined. And I think, lastly, these bromides, the way that he just has these throwaway lines to give stating with us on these things, it's time to build. I want to appreciate it because I don't like to be so negative on somebody's oeuvre, on their entire works, because of the person that's spouting them. I think there are interesting things to learn from any number of political enemies that I have, or historical enemies, or whomever. But I think it is the case that when it comes from clearly a place in here rather than a collective spirit, it's in the Marc Andreessen vision, then I hate it. I really, really detest this toxicity that he's peddling. He's a toxic merchant. This is highlighted mostly, once again, by his interview that he had. So I'll run you through some quotes here, skipping obviously the Obama one we already know. And so Duthat, which is the interviewer from New York Times, goes on to ask him, so what in concrete terms does that mean? What are the policies that shocked or surprised you about the Biden administration? Andreessen replied, they came for business in a very broad-based way. How is it that the very first thing you think of when you think of a Biden administration attacking you, or shocking you, or whatever, impinging your rights, is business? How is it not the health of the country in America and Americans in general, but it's business? Are you autistic? Are you so monomaniacal about business that the very essence of it is so sacred that if it is at all to be impugned, then you'll die on that pyre of death before dishonor on the subject of business? Really? That's what's pulling you into this? In your conceptual reality of politics, it's, well, is it good for business? That's the first question you ask. That's so paltry, Marc. It's pathetic. It's so soulless and disgusting to me that someone could think like this about their people, about their culture, about the entire history. And this is coming from someone who's supposed to be very well read in this. So very clearly he's an Araviste, some parvenu who's gone out and said, business got me here, thus business is of the ne plus ultra. It is the pinnacle of humanity, of importance. Because I think for him, it's like, well, I'm a businessman. Maybe he thinks of himself like that. It depends on the context, I suppose. He probably thinks of himself as a podcaster when he's on a podcast, and a political commentator when he's commentating politically, and a technology innovator when he's innovating technology. Nevertheless, he goes on in this way, in this fashion, and he also very clearly thinks of himself as, in his own prism of his identity, a problem solver. And so how problem solvers always operate is the same. Everything becomes a problem. It's the old adage, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So you go in and you frame a problem. You generate the problem. You have the proposition, you have the supposition, you have the heuristic around what applies here is the best way to solve this in the most min-maxed functional way. And then you have the solution, and look, I've solved this problem. Humans are not problems like that. They don't respond to that framework, and you can't go about trying to use politics in that way. It's not functional. Politics is not this mechanical fashioned object which you can just input and then get output. And clearly he misunderstands, or doesn't understand, he can't fathom it, which you would think he had the brain capacity, or at least the cerebral cortex, if not, then at least the size. But the density of synapses aside in this man's gigantic melon, we would look then to have a more humanistic display of patriotism from Marc. Clearly that's not the case. He goes on then also to comment rather large tracks in this interview, and more broadly I think in his other appearances, on the taxpayer, and him and the columnist, the journalist, have a spat about this, and that there was some, I don't know, umbrage taken on who is supposed to be the taxpayer or whatever. But let me just say that the rights of a taxpayer is not the totality of the people concerned with politics. If I am the administrator of an entire household, then there are maybe 7, 8 people who are concerned with political outcomes that aren't taxpayers if I'm the only one working. How can you be such a fucking spastic about this? And maybe this is very American, and it's particularly focused on the way that Americans perceive value, and value now is calculated as a taxpayer is providing value. Yeah, with a bunch of Mexicans who are providing sales taxes for states, do you want them to live with you? Clearly not. So taxes as a determinant of value are fairly low on the totem pole. Now, what's the proposition here? Is that anyone who's a taxpayer should get a say? Why? Why would I want a bunch of H-1B visa holders to have a say in anything? I don't even want their taxes. This is the logic here. Is like, what are you applying here that you want the interests of these people just because they pay tax? I mean, I'm also not concerned with people who pay no tax and just are bludging off the government purse. So it's not that you can make the argument both ways or neither or. It's to say that this is a very small factor that should be in a composite array of different variables as to why I would care about these people's opinions, and I wouldn't, clearly. But here we are. The last part here, where he goes on to say, I'm sure those fights are going to happen. And I'm just telling you, I'm fine with it on everything that you just described. He's talking about infighting, particularly faction fighting inside the Trump administration. I'm fine with it, like, whatever. I'm fine with it because what's the difference between the left and the right? The left wants revolution, and the right wants not the left. Now, I think he's very sincere here. He truly believes, A, that this was a adroit or a very clever thing to say. But I think B is that he sincerely thinks that the right just doesn't want the left. Let me tell you, Marc, we want a lot of things. There's a very clear picture. I can give you the schematics on what we want. And you far-right tech bros better be in it for the right reasons and not the wrong reasons. I can tell you that.